that we use to represent a number in mathematical. So we've got two letters. How many things do you, let's go back to yesterday's lesson. How many things do you see? How many terms in this sentence? Two of them, separated by an equal sign, right? You see a C thing, and you see an R thing with numbers written in front of it. No plus sign separating those. This is one thing, one term. This is another term. So are there any like terms up there at all?
No.
No. One's an R term, and one's a C term. They're not like. So we have avoided the step of getting rid of parentheses, because there's no grouping symbols. We've avoided the step of moving, changing signs, and using the adding rule, because there's no like terms to move. So we're really right in this problem, jump to the third step. It's very simple, yet it freaks out many of you over the years. All we have to do is divide or multiply to get what we want by itself. The book is going to ask you to solve this formula for one of the letters. In this case, they're asking you to solve it for R. Which in a geometric world, what is R? It's the radius of the circle. So they're saying, hey, solve this circumference formula for the radius. Now, that's the way they're going to write it in the book so that you know what to expect. Okay, Jay? You with me? Now, all we have to do is multiply or divide, right? Because what's happening to R here? What's happening to it? It's being multiplied by what? And? How do you undo multiplying? So if I divide this by 2, what does that do to it? If I divide it by pi, it kills off the pi, right?
You have to divide the other side.
You can do anything to anything, as long as you do it to everything. So if I divided the thing on the right side by 2 and pi, I've got to divide the thing on the left side by 2 and pi. And that is solving for radius. Look at the problem. Look at example 1. It says solve for R, then it says then, so they're asking you to do two things. Then find the radius of the circle when the circumference is 44. What does that tell you to do?
Plug 44 in for C.
44 in for what?
C.
In for C. It says circumference is 44.
44.
So you're going to write, everywhere you see C, you're going to write 44, and then you get around 7. That's the answer that they give you in example 1.
I knew it.
That's it.
If you know pi as a fraction.
Right. 22 seconds. So, got it? Example 2. Gives you a little different look, a little different formula, but don't let it freak you out. What's that a formula for?
Length and width. It's
perimeter.
yeah.
Perimeter. That's what P stands for. Perimeter of what?
It's
what kind of shape?
rectangle.
A rectangle. Where you have two lengths of a rectangle that are the same size, so you can call it two of them. And two widths that are the same length, so the same measurement, so you can call that two widths. It's the perimeter of a rectangle, right? You use that back in elementary school and middle school. They're asking you to solve this for W. Or I said back in Texas days, let's solve for W. We're going to solve for W. How are we going to do that? Let's go back to yesterday's lessons. How many things do you see in there?
3.
3. Of the 3 things, do you see any like things? No. No. But we want to get this one thing, W, all by itself on one side.
W?
Is it by itself on one side?
Yes. Well,
Is
no.
the W
it's
thing all
not by
no.
itself.
So what do you want to do with that L thing?
You want to move it to the other side.
Move it.
To the other side.
Move it.
To the other side.
Move it to the other side end.
Divide.
Move it to the other side end. What's your note say yesterday? Move it to the other side end. Change its sign. And then use the adding rule. Right? Except that when you move, in this case, when you move it to the other side, is P the same kind of thing as the L?
No.
So you're not going to write it above it, change the sign, and add, because you can't. You can't add P and L thing. They're different things, right? But when I move the 2L on this side, what happens to it? When I move the 2L on this side, what happens to it? It changes its sign, in this case to negative. I'm keeping my equal sign stacked. And what's left on the right-hand side?
2 W.
2 W's, right, Nick?
2
Excellent.
W.
Almost got W all by itself, except what's happening to W?
Divided by 2.
It's being multiplied by 2, so Cole is saying, how do I undo that? I divide by 2. W is being divided, multiplied by 2, so I divide to kill it off. But you can do anything to anything as long as you do it to everything. Have I done it to everything?
Nope.
On the other side, I've got how many things? 2 things, right? I've got to each one of those, I've got to do what? And so you can do it one of 2 ways. I did it that way. I took both things, made one long division bar, and divided it by 2. That's legit. Because in 3rd grade, Mrs. Wilson taught me that I can write a fraction like that. I can. Or I could write the fractions, I could split them up and write them like 2 fractions with the same denominator. She taught me I could do both of those things.
Mrs. Wilson did?
Yeah, she taught you too. Did you have Wilson in 3rd grade? Yeah, I'll share this because I digress. Mrs. Wilson was a lovely math teacher back in elementary school. I know you had her. We all had her. She was a lovely woman. Mrs. Wilson. She would walk around the room with her ruler as you were working in your math time, and she would watch you diligently, sitting in your little chairs. Remember those days where you laughed milk out of your nose? Remember elementary school? All of a sudden? Yeah, Mrs. Wilson was a lot. She would walk around and she'd have a ruler and she'd be slapping it in her hand. As she was watching you do your math, she'd look lovingly over your shoulder. That's wrong! I can't believe you're so stupid. How would you do that? She was a lovely woman, you know? As she looked down on you, you'd look up at her and look through her 3 nostrils. I know you had Mrs. Wilson.
Arabic guy named Rafiq.
So Mrs. Wilson taught you these things. So you could write the fractions either way.
Can you tell us who Miss Wilson?
So you could write it this way, or you could write it in 2 fractions as
Woo!
what?
Smile for the camera.
What? P divided by 2 minus
L.
2L divided by 2. That's legit also. Except we're not hillbillies. We've seen this before, so how would we change that? What's 2 divided by 2?
1.
Something. It's 1. And what's 1 times L?
L.
So we could
L.
just change it. If we knew we could reduce it. Either way, though, is legit. Isolate them. Okay? So you can isolate. You can use either form, either way that you wrote that fraction. Doesn't matter. But then they say once you get W isolated, solve for W or find the value for W when the L is when the L is 12 and the perimeter is 41. So what does that tell you to do? Plug them in for those letters, right? You're going to have 41 and 12. This for perimeter, this for L, and that's what W is. Now you just do the arithmetic. But I have to ask you, because I talked about it a couple of days ago, do you see any grouping symbols in this sentence?
Yes.
Where? What? The division bar. Is this a grouping symbol, the number 12? No, it's just a parenthesis so that you don't read that as 212. You feeling me? This is your grouping symbol, which says you must do everything up here first, everything down here first, before you do the division. Okay? So you do the arithmetic. This is what? 24, except it's what kind of 24?
Negative.
And so what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with 41 and negative 24?
You're gonna subtract.
Are the signs the same or different?
Different.
So you're going to subtract, keep the sign of the
larger.
And what do you get? 17, right?
Yeah.
But positive or negative? Positive. So there's your W. There's your W.
W.
Example 3 is really the same. Give you another formula, ask you to solve for one of the letters, do the steps you learned yesterday to get it by itself, don't freak out. If you have questions, let me know. They're going to say, hey, solve for that 1 with those other letters. They give you a number, you plug it in. So I've showed you everything you need today. Here's what you're looking at. As you fondly remember Mrs. Wilson, how wonderful she was in her youthful math. Questions? those 3 problems from yesterday's assignment. Make sure it's in the tray before you leave. These 10 or 11 problems, try not to have homework, but you got lots of time.